In 1949, a man died in Paris carrying secrets that could have changed the course of world history. His teachings were so powerful that some believe they influenced both Hitler and Stalin. His name was George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, and he may have been the most dangerous spiritual master to ever walk the earth. But dangerous to whom? And why? Over the next 45 minutes, you will discover why Gurdjieff was banned from countries, why his methods terrified even his own students, and why, decades after his death, his ideas are still considered too explosive for the average human mind. Gurdjieff was not just a spiritual teacher. He was a destroyer of illusions, a breaker of false personalities, a man who believed that the only way to awaken human consciousness was through shock, inner conflict, and brutal confrontation with our own lies. Born at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, during a time when empires were collapsing and the modern world was being born, Gurdjieff realized something humanity had forgotten, that we live asleep, that we are biological machines running on autopilot, and that to awaken was the most dangerous thing a human being could ever do. Today, you're going to experience the journey that transformed him into the most feared and respected master of his time. A journey that began with a single question: who am I, really? Alexandropol, 1877. A boy with piercing eyes watches his father, a carpenter and bard, reciting ancient epics under the stars. But while other children were enchanted by the tales of heroes, young George asked questions that haunted the adults. Why do people live as if they're dead inside? He asked. Why do they follow rituals they don't understand? Why does no one question if there's something beyond this reality we see? By age 20, Gurdjieff had mastered languages, studied mathematics, philosophy, and sacred texts. But nothing, absolutely nothing, answered his fundamental question. And so, he made the most dangerous decision of his life. Gurdjieff gathered a group of extraordinary men. Scientists, doctors, archaeologists, linguists, all united by a shared obsession to find humanity's lost knowledge. They called themselves the Seekers of Truth, and what they planned was the most audacious spiritual expedition of modern times. For over 20 years, these men vanished from civilization. They infiltrated Tibetan monasteries guarded for centuries. They disguised themselves as merchants to access secret schools of dervishes in Afghanistan. They risked their lives in places where foreigners were killed on sight. And what they discovered transformed them into something the world had never seen before. Tibet, 1898. Gurdjieff and his companions reached a monastery that appeared on no map. For 6 months, they observed monks performing movements that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Dances that created altered states of consciousness. Exercises that revealed hidden layers of the human psyche. It was there that Gurdjieff had his first terrifying revelation. Human beings possess not one, but multiple levels of consciousness. And the vast majority of people live and die without ever accessing even a fraction of their true potential. But it was in a cave in the Hindu Kush where Gurdjieff discovered something that deeply frightened him. Ancient manuscripts described techniques to control not just one's own consciousness, but the consciousness of others. Methods to awaken people so abruptly that many went insane in the process. Gurdjieff realized he was holding the fire of human transformation. And like all fire, it could either illuminate or destroy. In that moment, he made a choice that would define his destiny. He would not only learn these methods, he would refine them, make them even more powerful, and then bring them to the sleeping West. 4 years, in the mountains of Central Asia, Gurdjieff underwent initiations that shattered who he had been. Fasts that lasted weeks. Total isolation meditations that exposed the illusion of personality. Physical exercises that broke all his psychological resistance. But the most brutal initiation nearly killed him. For 40 days in a sealed cave, without food, only water, Gurdjieff confronted every lie he had ever told himself. Every mask he wore. Every defense mechanism he had built. When he emerged, he was no longer George Gurdjieff, the seeker. He was something new. Something even his own companions barely recognized. The master who led his final initiation gave him an impossible test. Now that you are awake, how will you awaken others without destroying them? How will you break people's illusions without breaking their minds? Gurdjieff realized he had discovered the most dangerous responsibility in the universe. The power to transform human consciousness. And with that power came a terrifying insight. Most people preferred their mental prisons to the frightening freedom of true awakening. That's when the fourth way was born. A method of transformation that didn't require retreating from the world, but worked through the friction of daily life. Extreme physical work. Impossible mental tasks. Brutal emotional confrontations. But why so extreme? Why so dangerous? Because Gurdjieff had discovered that the sleep of human consciousness was so deep, so resistant, that only monumental shocks could break it. When he returned to the West in 1912, he brought with him methods that terrified even the most courageous spiritual seekers. France, 1922. Gurdjieff established the Prière de Bases Loges, a school unlike anything the world had ever seen. There was no comfort, no mercy, only brutal work and forced awakening. Parisian intellectuals arrived expecting philosophical lectures. Instead, they were handed shovels and ordered to dig ditches under the scorching sun. Sensitive artists came seeking inspiration. Gurdjieff made them clean stables and care for animals. But why? Why would a spiritual master torture his students? Because Gurdjieff had discovered something revolutionary. The ordinary personality is like armor that blocks real growth. And only through friction, conflict, and extreme discomfort could that armor be broken. And then, there were the movements. Sacred dances Gurdjieff brought from the most secret monasteries of Asia. Exercises so complex, they were impossible to perform while unconscious. Catherine Mansfield, the famous writer, said the movements revealed parts of herself she never knew existed. Other students reported mystical experiences so intense they were forever changed. But there was always a price. Some couldn't handle the intensity and ran. Others suffered nervous breakdowns. And Gurdjieff watched silently, knowing that only those truly committed to awakening would survive the process. A road between Paris and Fontainebleau. Gurdjieff's car flips violently. He should have died. Instead, something extraordinary happened. As his body slowly recovered, his mind entered a state of absolute clarity. During this forced recovery, Gurdjieff wrote Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, a book so dense, so complex, that he himself said, "I wrote this book in such a way that the reader will be forced to think." 1,000 pages of allegories, symbols, and hidden teachings. Gurdjieff encoded his entire knowledge into a book that worked like a consciousness awakening machine. Reading it was an initiation. Many couldn't finish it. Those who did were never the same. In the final years of his life, Gurdjieff carefully chose who would receive his deepest teachings. P.D. Ouspensky, Maurice Nicoll, John Bennett. Each carried a fragment of the sacred fire to different parts of the world. But Gurdjieff warned them, this knowledge is like radioactivity. It can heal, or it can destroy. Use it wisely, or it will destroy you and everyone you touch. And they understood why their master was considered so dangerous. Because his methods actually worked. Because they truly awakened people. And a truly awakened humanity would be a completely different species. October 29, 1949. Gurdjieff dies in Paris, but his teachings continue to spread like a virus of consciousness. Why? Because he had discovered something the systems of human control want to keep hidden. That we are far more powerful than we imagine. That our ordinary personality is just a mask. That we can develop multiple centers of consciousness. That we can literally wake up from the mechanical sleep of life. Today, Gurdjieffian groups still exist, quietly, secretly, around the world. Practicing the movements. Studying the fourth way. Applying methods still considered too radical for mainstream spirituality. So why was Gurdjieff the most dangerous spiritual master of all time? Because he proved that real awakening is not comfortable. It's not easy. And it's not for everyone. He proved that true spiritual transformation requires the death of everything we think we are, and the birth of something we didn't even know we could become. So the question is, are you ready for that kind of danger? Are you ready to discover who you really are, beneath all the masks you wear? Because if you are, Gurdjieff left the map. But be careful. Some paths change you in ways there's no coming back from. If this journey awakens something in you, share it with those brave enough to question everything they believe about themselves. And subscribe to this channel to discover more secrets from the masters who dared to awaken humanity, even knowing the danger it represented.